not full yet, is it? Do you still have more room up here? Yeah, okay, very good, very good. This is a talk I'm very excited to give you. Not that I'm not excited to talk about the bean stack and other things, but as a presenter, I obviously am very interested in slide software, slide presentation software. If I were a car guy, I could sit down with my son and we can talk about how many cylinders a car has and the size of the wheels and all. I can barely count the number of wheels on my car. I'm not a car guy at all. But having been doing what I'm doing right now for over 20 years, I've used so many different software slideshow presentation packages. And what I'm most excited about is for the past several years, I've not been using a dedicated software package at all. I've been presenting my slides in a web browser. So, you might have thought years ago, well, you'd never be able to use a web browser for, I don't know, checking your email. Now we do it all the time, don't we? Well, you can never use a browser. It'd never be secure enough to do bank transactions. Well, of course we do bank transactions. Well, can we buy things? Well, yeah, Amazon and all kinds of things like that. So slideshows are yet another obvious, or maybe not so obvious, wonderful use of web technology. As a matter of fact, I've been trying to remember to let everyone know at the beginning of each one of these presentations that all of my slides are now available at my.thirstyhead.com. Now, I'm slowly but surely rolling them all out. So these aren't all of the slides, but certainly all the slides that all the presentations I'm giving here this week at GIDS will be available to you at my.thirstyhead.com. And what's nice is they're all HTML-based slides. So you don't have to worry about owning Keynote or owning PowerPoint or dealing with PDF plugins or things like that. As I'm kind of preparing for my in between talks, reminding myself of the slides, I don't always have to pull out my laptop anymore and launch Keynote and deal with that. I'm able to pull out my iPad and just casually flip through these slides just to kind of remind myself what I'm going to be talking about in the next presentation. So all these slides as well are not just desktop oriented. You'll be able to view them on your tablets. You could probably view them on your smartphone as well, although you'd need a microscope to read all the source code in fine print. But the beautiful thing about HTML5, of course, is that it is mobile and tablet ready as well. So with that, back to our regularly scheduled program. HTML5 Slidemaking 101. So as I said, my name is Scott Davis. I run a company called ThirstyHead.com. And what I have found is that sometimes a good presentation doesn't have to be more than 3, 4, maybe 5 slides, but sometimes it helps just trying to bring a point. What I've started doing with a lot of clients, especially when they're remote clients, if we're having to walk through, this is how internationalization works in Grails. Or here's how we're going to deal with this auditing Hibernate plugin. Or here's how we're going to do these things. Sometimes putting together a very quick slideshow is very helpful. But again, if I do it in PowerPoint, that assumes that you have PowerPoint on the other end. And if I'm in the most recent version of PowerPoint and they're using PowerPoint 97, that introduces a problem. And if I'm in Keynote and they're not on a Mac, they can't do these things. So once again, doing these presentations, but doing them in a web browser, makes it incredibly easy just to say, hey, go to this URL and let's follow along with each other. Now, I haven't always been doing my slides in a web browser. This is the first version of PowerPoint I used. This is a trick question. Do you know the very first version of PowerPoint that was available on Windows? It wasn't 1.0. It was PowerPoint 2.0. PowerPoint 2.0 was the very first version that was available to you on a Windows platform. It came out the same day as Windows 3.0. So that lets you know how long it's been around. That same trivia works for Microsoft Excel as well. Microsoft acquired PowerPoint from the Macintosh platform ported it over to Windows. Microsoft acquired the Excel spreadsheet program, ported it over to Windows, and released it as well. I was using Excel before Windows was actually on the market. It was kind of fun. From a DOS prompt, I would type in EXCEL, and it would very quickly launch a Windows runtime and then bring up the spreadsheet right in the middle of it. I would minimize Excel, and there was nothing behind the scenes. No program manager, no file manager, no anything at all. I was like, well, this is the silliest thing I've ever seen. It just was a little bit ahead of its time. Yeah. So this is where PowerPoint began, PowerPoint 1.0 on the Mac. And oh, by the way, it's not a mistake that that's in black and white. At that time, Macintoshes were black and white as well. PowerPoint was what you would use to print out big cellophane transparencies that you would put on an overhead projector to do these kinds of things. So PowerPoint, the reason I started here is it is the 800-pound gorilla in the room. It's not the oldest presentation software on the market. It's not the best, but it certainly has the market share. As of 2012, PowerPoint claims about 95% of the market. And as much fun as we like having at Microsoft's expense, I always like letting folks know I've got 15 Microsoft certifications as well. I'm certainly willing to give Microsoft credit where credit is due. And what other company can we think of that had a 95% market share in operating systems, a 95% market share in web browsers, 95% market share in word processors, spreadsheets, and presentation software as well? That is where Microsoft deserves credit. It's incredible to think what a standard it was. Now, it was the last century, in the 20th century, but for a good 10 years, we were living in the Box Microsoft era, where as long as it was Windows-based, you had a reasonable chance of having some cross-platform compatibility. But now we're in an era where we can't depend on Windows because we have iPhones and we have Androids and we have Firefox phones and we have Samsung phones and all kinds of different things. So PowerPoint, quite a bit of market share, a nice little bit of software, but certainly has some limitations we need to be aware of as well. Now, the other major player on the market is Keynote. I know that Josh uses Keynote. I was a long-time Keynote user. It's a brilliant piece of presentation software. Of course, it only runs on Apples. This software is what Steve Jobs used to give all of his keynotes. And if you ever want to go back and look at someone who is just a master of his craft, I'm not talking about trivial, unimportant things like inventing the iPhone, right? Or being the CEO of Pixar movie theaters. I'm talking about being a good presenter up on stage, important stuff, right? If you ever get an opportunity to go back and see any old videos of him presenting, anything that you can do to emulate his style and his ease of presentation up on stage is worth doing. So Keynote came from Steve Jobs himself. This is what he was using. Now, what's interesting is that Keynote only runs on Macs, and so you're at a bit of a disadvantage there to begin with. We've said that PowerPoint has about 95% of the market share, so we can see that Keynote has a very narrow market share. But boy, who's using it? Steve Jobs among them. But the apple is kind of interesting. This is a blog entry by Tim O'Reilly, written back in 2002, so over a decade ago. But he said, boy, it's not that the OS X platform, the Apple platform, is going to take over the world. But he says the people who are using it, the alpha geeks, in his word, are the ones that are using it. He says the entire Perl team was dealing with Macintoshes. I can speak from experience that the entire Groovy and Grails team are out in Macintoshes. If you even look at the presenters here, the professional presenters over on the, from the States especially, we find that among presenters, Macs have an overwhelming majority of the market share. 80-90% of presenters end up using Macintoshes. So even though it's small in real numbers, it's profoundly influential in terms of alpha geeks, presenters, language inventors, good things like that. Brian Getz, the lead architect on the Java project, is a Mac guy. So if you look at the Java team, the Ruby team, the Groovy team, the Clojure team, teams like that, all of them are predominantly using Macs. Interesting. Interesting. So much so that many times you'll go into a conference and all you'll see are a glow of those white apples on the backs of those laptops. This is not a staged photo. This is someone that said, hey, I went to the conference and took this casual photo, and then look, every single person sitting there has a Mac. And that's not an Apple conference, obviously. That was a Ruby on Rails conference. So this is the first presentation software I used, Harvard Graphics. Did anyone use Harvard Graphics back in the day? No? For all you young kids over here, these are floppy disks. Do you remember those things? Huh? Yeah, plug in one, 5 1/4 floppy in the next to do these kinds of things. So yeah, Harvard Graphics came out in 1986, so we predated PowerPoint at this point. It started out on the DOS platform, along with Lotus 123 and WordPerfect and all those other software packages you don't use anymore. But the very first presentation program out there, for the PCs at least, was called ExecuVision. I've never even used it. Has anyone here used ExecuVision? I'll be really impressed. No one ever raises their hands. No one ever raises their hands. This came out in 82. If you remember, the first IBM PC came out in 81, the PC XT. So this was a very, very early stage software. So if that was out in 81, here we are, 25 years later? And what has changed among all these things? We've had 25 years to evolve the platform. And what does this software still do? Allow you to put text and images on a screen and move from one slide to the next to the next. Arguably, we can see that web browsers have tremendously increased in capabilities. Word processors are now doing on-the-fly syntax checking and grammar checking and all kinds of things. Spreadsheets are allowing you to do pivot tables and macros and multiple tabs and all kinds of things. What does presentation software do differently that it didn't do back in 1981? Not much at all. So, I would argue that maybe the biggest innovation in the last 5-10 years or so is SlideShare. Have any of you been to SlideShare before, slideshare.com? It's a wonderful website, yeah. And it's exactly what you would want it to do. It's a clearinghouse for all these presentations. You can upload your PowerPoint presentations. You can upload your Keynote presentations. You can upload your PDFs and translate them all so you can view them in a web browser. You see where I'm going with this, right? Why would you start with a proprietary binary nut, upload it to a service so they can translate it in a way that you can view it in a web browser, when you can completely cut out that middleman and start with web-friendly content to begin with? And that's what we're going to talk about this afternoon. HTML5 Slidemaking. So then, what is slideshow? You start thinking to yourself, all right, what are we able to do here, or more importantly, what are we not able to do? Because when I talk to people, the first thing they say is, yeah, I'd really thought about using a browser, but, oh, well, I don't know, does it handle colors? Well, yeah, it handles colors. Does it handle images? Well, of course it does. Text? Yeah. Transitions? Yeah. Keyboard shortcuts? Yeah. We begin building up a laundry list of things that we need it to do, theming and styling and images and videos and audio and all kinds of things. What we really begin figuring out then is what are the things that it can do complicated bit of software like PowerPoint or Keynote couldn't. On, and I'm trying to reset it without any luck. Is anyone, I have lost all my support here. Okay, I can color. I also have another mic over here. Belts and suspenders, right? All right. From wandering the stage a little bit. I apologize about that. What I was saying is, yes. Is this going out as well? Unbelievable. If that went out, then the talk is off. We're done. What I was saying is, the question is not can the browser do everything that PowerPoint or Keynote can do. The question very quickly becomes, what can the browser do that these presentation packages can't? It becomes seamless to, embed video. It becomes seamless to start dealing with SVG and MathML and things like that. It's even really trivial to do things, like have, I was just looking for a hyperlink, and I don't have any hyperlinks in here yet, but I know I will in a little bit. Having hyperlinks directly in this slide deck right here so I can click and pop up additional content. So these are the kinds of things that make HTML5 slide making very interesting. We also have interesting options like being able to work offline. So once you download all the content, can you go into airplane mode on your phone and continue to view it? Absolutely. Can you run it without any plugins, without the requirements of Flash or Java? Yeah, you bet. Navigation, full screen support. This is just running in a browser. With a URL line and everything else, you can tell I'm on slide 15 right now of my presentation. But with one keystroke and F, I'm able to run this full screen, hide the URL, hide everything else. This laundry list right here, mobile device support, all this kind of stuff, is really just a laundry list of HTML5 features. And that is what kept me from adopting this earlier, is not that the browser wasn't able to support it or anything. It was that the HTML5 standard wasn't pervasive enough to make me feel like I could use this, not on my own laptop, but pervasive enough that I could share this around. Now HTML5 browsers have been around for 5 or 6 years at this point. If you're still using Internet Explorer 6, you aren't going to be able to view these slide decks. But I'll even give you an option for that in just a moment. But really, what has really spawned this HTML5 slideware revolution is HTML5. The capabilities that we have now are really making it a compelling platform for this kind of content. So much so that this is just a partial list of all of the various different slideshows that are available to you. We're going to cover each one of them in great depth, so I hope you're ready for all this. No, we wouldn't nearly have enough time to do that. So we're going to focus on 3. These are 3 that I've all used in various capacities. Slidy.js was what I used first. Deck.js is what I used for a number of years. For almost all the years I've been here, I've been using Deck.js for my presentations. But just in the past 6 months or so, I've converted over to Reveal.js. So we'll talk about all 3 of these and the strengths and weaknesses of each. Did my wireless mic come back on? No, not yet. All right, I'll stay till kids. Like I said, nothing up my sleeve. We've never seen this before in our life, right? And so we'll come back in here. Here now is my nice empty HTML file. So if I come in here right now and say this is slide 1, this in a web browser. There are my slides. Any questions? Doesn't it look beautiful? Okay, well, we're not done yet. We're not done yet. One of the things I want to do here to begin with is just add a little bit of inline style here so we can begin seeing the difference. I'm feeling kind of patriotic, so I'll start these out as red, white, and blue. Yeah. Oh, it's not working. Yeah, I'm using this one for right now. Thank you very much. So if we come back in here and refresh, all right, now we're a little bit better, so we can begin seeing these 3 slides. But one of the things you're probably thinking is, now, wait a second, those slides, I want something that's going to be a little bit closer to my actual screen size. You know that we can, in a console, we can ask for, I'll zoom in just a second here, I can ask for the window's inner height and the window's inner width. So I'm using JavaScript to do a little bit of introspection on this. And of course, if I can call getters on that, I should be able to call setters as well. Not necessarily on the window, but maybe what I want to do is come in here and add a head section and add a style section, and then say each one of my sections, are we back in business? So now what I can say is, for every section, all I want to do is I want to set the width to, let's say, 1024 pixels, and the height to 720 pixels. Right? And so now all of a sudden I can come over here and we can see that I've got one slide and another slide and another slide. Right? It's always the right size. So now I am going to invoke the cancer of our industry and copy and paste. Of course, it's okay when I do it. It's not okay when you do it, but it's okay when I do it. Right? Yeah, hypocrisy is a wonderful thing, isn't it? All right, so now what I can show you is, all right, one of the things I'll do is I'll add a surrounding div so I can get my hands on it. So I'll look in that div, and every section inside of it, I will set the height and width to be based on what the individual window's height is. And so if I come in here once again and I say, these are my slides. Are you with me now? Right, so I just wrapped them in a container so I could see where all my slides are. And I said, all right, as long as I'm in that slides container, every section is going to have that width and height associated with it. What this is going to allow me to do is be able to resize. Come on, there we go. Be able to resize, and those slides will always be the appropriate height. Are you with me on that? Yeah? So really, we just have a last few minute little touch-ups that we want to do here. I'm not going to bore you with trying to type these in by hand, but we can see what we would be doing is setting a current class and a next class, but doing a little show and hiding of these things. So once we're able to, hey, initialize my slideshow, next and previous my way through, drop that right in there like so. Yep. And the last thing we'll do is we'll wire up a key handler. So if I'm hitting left or up, it'll call previous slide. And if I'm hitting right or down, I'll go to the next slide. I promise you, this is the end of the live coding portion of this little presentation, or the live copying and pasting as we go along there. But really, there's not much JavaScript in there to handle the keystroke, previous slide, next slide, doing an init, and handling a window resize. All of this is going to allow me to quite simply next and next and previous and previous. And you'll see there's still there. Oops, that shouldn't have been there. Let's try that one more time here. There we go. I just kind of caught it midway there. We can see that slides 2 and 3 are no longer there. They're available. And now when I move to slide 2, I can see it's the only slide available. And I move to slide 3, it's the only slide available. So at the end of the day, this is why there are so many various HTML-based slide decks out there. I just put it together for you right now in under 100 lines of code. That is what makes this so very, very exciting, is that there's very little JavaScript you need to write. Now, what I didn't include here is the ability to pull up an overview of all my slides, or to deal with different transitions, or deal with a variety of different things. And this is why we reach out to different libraries to provide that functionality. But at their core, they're all doing fundamentally this, which is really nice and really refreshing, that it is high value and low complexity to add. All right, let's now cover the three we said we were going to talk about. We're going to talk about Slidy.js, Deck.js, and Reveal.js. And this is in order of coolness. This is the least cool of the three. But this is the first one that I got started with. And what's nice about this is Slidy came out of the World Wide Web Consortium. So we know that it's standards-based, which means it's not IE only. It is also something that'll run equally well on all browsers. This is what I was telling you right here, is that in this presentation, I can have hyperlinks now that will take me out to the different websites that I am discussing. So you will have all these links available to you on my.thirstyhead.com as well. Notice that I'm using my same presentation clicker right now, but now I'm in Slidy, and I can begin moving through these slide decks. The other fun thing about all these presentation frameworks that I'm going to show you is all of their documentation is in a slideshow. They're using a slideshow to demonstrate the slideshow, so you learn how to build the slideshow in the slideshow, so you can figure out how to do the slide. Okay, you get it, right? It's turtles all the way down. Yeah. So in this slideshow right here, they're saying, hey, look at this. It works across all browsers and works just like PowerPoint. You can click with your mouse, you can click with a clicker, or you can slide if you're on a tablet to do these kinds of things. We have a number of other kind of keystrokes in here as well. I can hit C to bring up a table of contents. So these are all the slides in the presentation. Table of contents to get back to where you need to go, right? I can use forward and back keystrokes right here. I can turn the footer on and off down on the bottom there. I can even use A to display all slides if I did want to do this horizontal scroll, or I can use A once again to turn that off and get back into one slide at a time kind of views. So this is a really nice, well put together slide framework. It's reasonably full featured. It does what you need it to do. If you want to get started, he says, yeah, this is what we'll do. We give you a little boilerplate right here. And so avert your eyes. I wouldn't dare copy and paste this like for real, but certainly here for the sake of time, I can come in here, and there's my GIDs. Let me make a Slidy directory in there. Slidy, there we go. And in Slidy, there's the code we're looking at. So what are we dealing with here? All right, well, there's my title right there. Here's some meta content. We're linking out to some various CSS and JavaScript to deal with it. But then they say right here in the body, this is where your slides need to end up going. So what do our slides end up looking like? Well, let's come back here and take a look. Well, each one of your slides ends up looking something like this. Div, class equals slide. And then from there you can start including any images you want, anything else like that. So I might decide to come in and Why do you think... Oh, now we're in trouble. All right. Why do you not think that we're an HTML file here? What did I miss when I'm copying and pasting all this? Now let's try this once again. I don't think I can tell... I can tell that I'm in a bad way because my autocomplete is not working. Take this off once again. Well, if it doesn't work, I've got an example I can show you right here. But boy, sure would be nice. All right. Let's do this. Let me kick over to my CAN version right here. So we can see that there's a div class that has a background in it, and there's a slide, and there's a slide, and there's a slide, and there's a slide. Yeah? So very similar to that roll your own that I did earlier. Let me bring this back up in a web browser. Let's come in here to Slidy. And there's my Slidy presentation, my first slide, my second slide, my third and fourth, and so on. And just to prove to you right here, here's my first GID slide. My first GID slide. Yeah? So Slidy is really doing exactly what we did before. It's got its own particular set of CSS classes to deal with. It's got its own custom JavaScript to deal with this. But again, it's very simple. If you are at all comfortable with HTML, it should be very simple for you to go into Slidy and begin building out your own slide presentations. So these are all things that we demonstrated live, but it's nice having it there in the documentation as we go along. The upside to Slidy is that it is mature. It's been around since 2005. It's got great legacy support, and as a matter of fact, this is the biggest pro, is that it works in the IE 6s and 7s and 8s. I've had more than one client bring me on board to do exactly this. We have all this PowerPoint content. We want to make it mobile friendly. We want to update it to HTML5. Oh, and we need to support IE7 as well. You get to choose that, right? You get to choose if you want to have HTML5 and mobile support, or if you want to have IE7 support. IE9 was the first Microsoft browser that had okay HTML5 support. IE10 was better, and IE11 is better still. So if you do need to support legacy browsers, Slidy is what I would reach out for. It's got okay, but not great mobile support. It's amazing the support it did. The first iPhone came out in 2007. So the fact that this predates all of the iPhones and Androids and Windows phones and things like that and still works fairly well on that gives you an idea that when you do standards-based development, you get long life out of these things. So the downside is we saw that this was XHTML based, not HTML5 based. And yeah, there's been a lot that has gone on in the last decade or so of web development that Slidy doesn't take advantage of. So then, enter Deck.js. Deck.js was something that I used for several years. I am very happy with Deck.js. Now, I told you I am using Reveal.js now, but I gotta let you know that Deck.js is no slouch by any stretch of the imagination. Let's dive in. There, of course, is a slide deck that will allow you to click around in it. So here we are in Deck.js. I'm able to use my clicker to move up and down and move around and do just like we would expect it to. Here is what Deck.js code ends up looking like. Again, shouldn't be anything too scary at all. We've got a container, deck container, and each slide is a slide, is a slide, is a slide as we go along. So you should begin seeing a very consistent pattern here. The deck core module keeps track of what slide is being shown right now, deck.current, previous, And next, we did that in our own roll your own JavaScript as well. It also tells you what slide you're on as well. So these are all things that you can use CSS to style up or JavaScript to introspect on, so you can see what slide they're on, what previous and next, and all those kinds of things are. All kinds of interesting plugins as well. And where Slidy.js was just a single CSS file and a single JavaScript, there weren't really many plugins. There were features that were included, but there weren't a lot of third-party plugins. What originally attracted me to Deck.js were just that, the third-party plugins. So if you like this go-to, if you like this deck status, if you like a different set of navigations in there, these are all plugins that you can add, which of course are just a JavaScript and a CSS file as you go along. So all of these are incredibly easy to extend. Have any of you ever tried to create your own PowerPoint template? It's possible, but not many people do. They end up just finding them on the web or using your corporate standards, or the worst one would be taking an existing slide deck, copying and pasting it, and scraping all the content out. That's not extensible by any stretch, right? But something like this is extensible, so you can start applying your own corporate colors, but because it's CSS and JavaScript, it's incredibly easy to start building your own lightsaber once again. Very important to me. So they said, if you only know HTML, that's fine. We got a bunch of pre-made templates and things like that. You can download it and just start using it out of the box. They said, you know what? If you're a hacker, that's not what they're saying there, but we're in polite company, right? If you're a hacker, you can go in and begin extending this. You can start doing your own kinds of things. But you know what? They give you a zip file that you can download. And the zip file has everything that you need to get started. When you bust open that zip file, and here is the zip file, deck.js.latest. So if I were to download that and simply go in to the Deck.js folder, you can see that it's got JavaScript, it's got HTML, it's got that boilerplate HTML in there. So let's see what that looks like. Let's come back here to localhost 8000. Let's go into deck.js.latest and launch boilerplate. And you've got slide, content here. What does that end up looking like in terms of code? Deck.js latest. Boilerplate, slide, content here. A refresh. Yeah? But what's interesting about this is what they said is we've got a bunch of preloaded stuff available to us. So themes, right? We are using a particular theme right now. Let's try to figure out what theme we're using. Let's turn around and look at that CSS. So right now we are using the Swiss theme. If you wanted to change themes, let's come in here and see what neon would end up looking like. There's the neon. Refresh. Nothing too hard, right? Colors and fonts and various things like that. What does the Web 2.0 theme look like? Web 2.0, a refresh. So what's nice about this is not only do they give you a couple of themes, that's something Slidy didn't give you as well. You could have it any color you wanted as long as it was blue and white. Yeah? But here they shipped with a couple of those basic standards. We can also go in here and say, oh, well, what transitions are we using? Right now, we're using the fade transition. What it would look like if we did the horizontal slide transition. So now, my content is going like that. So in the spirit of kind of building your own lightsaber as well, they've given you now some theming that once you go in and take a look at, you can start saying, okay, well, here's what they are using to style this up. It shouldn't be too hard for us to go in and begin creating our own themes. So, Deck.js is definitely a nice step up from Slidy. It gives us all of the same basic fundamentals, but additionally it allows us to create our own themes, create our own transitions, and so on and so forth. There are a number of third-party plugins out there, and what I'm looking for at this point is really interesting. Many people just look for features. Features are important to me, but now I'm at the point where I'm always looking for extensibility as well. How extensible is my tool? And this really is one of those tools that demonstrates that nicely. I gotta let you know that these cons are the lowest priority cons I could possibly tell you about. I used this slide deck for a number of years. It was my go-to platform. But there were just a couple of things that kind of bothered me about it. Yeah, I can't do a per slide style or a per slide transition. It didn't support kind of full bleed images, full screen images, things like that. So this is one of those things, these are minor details. In the large, this is a really well put together framework. Modern, well supported, extensible. What drew me to Deck.js originally was not Deck.js. It was actually AsciiDoc is what drew me to it. AsciiDoc and AsciiDoctor, there are two similar projects in there, are a very Markdown-like way of doing this. How many of you are working with Markdown? Yeah. AsciiDoc is like Markdown's college-educated big brother. Markdown is really appropriate for individual blogs and things like that. AsciiDoc has that same kind of syntax, but it allows you to create table of contents and bibliography. It allows you to deal with PDF output as well as HTML output as well as Microsoft Word output and crazy things like that. So it is really Markdown++. And in that same spirit, there was actually a Deck.js backend for AsciiDoc. So what that was allowing me to do was write my slides in AsciiDoc like this, Mastering Grails Advanced, allowing me to deal with a lot of comments, but AsciiDoc allows you to declare variables as well. So throughout my presentation, I could refer to the author or the email or the revision date or things like that, and you'll see where some of these variables came into play. It allowed me to set my transitions and my themes and things like that. But each one of these double equal signs in there is an H2 or a header 2, and this is how I was able to go in and begin building out my slide decks very, very easily. You can see I'm linking out to images now. I've got bulleted lists here, element 1, element 2, and so on and so forth. So what I would do is I would write it in AsciiDoc, and then I would convert it to a Deck.js backend, and this is what it would end up looking like. Mastering Denver Grails. Course outline. I'll tell you one of the things I really did like about this is you see I was able to turn on scrollable. This is one thing that you can't do in PowerPoint or Keynote or anything else, but I can do in a browser. So if I was dealing with a lot of large content and things like that, and in many of my classes I would be able to come in here right now and say, yeah, I want to make this slide deck scrollable both vertically and horizontally so I can get at that kind of stuff. But coming back in here right now, let's see, where were we at? We named this Mastering Denver Grails. If I call this Mastering India Grails, When I come back over here to my browser, oops, wrong browser. When I come back over here to my browser and refresh, it still says Denver. Because remember, I am not writing in HTML anymore. I need to convert that. So I need to come out here to my command line. Let me head over to the proper directory. Deck.js, AsciiDoc. There we go. Oops. And let me run that little script. And now, mastering India. So the upside is I've got a nice kind of easy bit of syntax to use. The downside is I'm adding a little bit more complexity to my workflow. I've got to make sure that I write it, convert it, write it, convert it, write it, convert it. You can set up a watch process to do it automatically, and that's what I would end up doing. So, pretty straightforward stuff there. But this is what we've all been waiting for, right? Reveal.js. This is my new love. It's not that new. I've been using it for well over 6 months now. This is what I'm slowly but surely converting everything over to. This is why I've got well over 100 slide presentations out there, but my slide presentations are in an unhealthy mix of PowerPoint and Keynote and Slidy and Deck. So as I'm migrating them all up to my.thirstyhead.com, I'm also converting them all to Reveal.js as well. So it's giving me an opportunity to kind of cull the herd a little bit, upgrade it to a modern slide framework, and then publish it to my.thirstyhead.com. But Reveal.js is much like Deck.js in that its documentation is browser-based. I can click through it. It's got a nice look and feel. It's got kind of nice, fun transitions. One of the things that they support, I don't use this in my presentations, but I know a lot of folks like the idea of having two-dimensional slide decks. So not only can I migrate up and down like this, I can migrate left and right like this as well. I thought this was a very interesting thing. This is completely open source. The way the developer is funding development on it, come on, there we go, is he's got a website out there called Slide.js, slides, and he also has slides.com here, right here. But this is an online IDE where you can go in and begin building up your slides in a graphical environment. So you don't even need to go in and handwrite HTML. That's one thing that some people say, well, I like PowerPoint because I can drag the GUI things around. You know how I feel about GUIs, right? I enjoy dragging them around as well. But boy, developing my slides in AsciiDoc is much faster than dragging elements around. But this is really nice, and his pricing model is much like GitHub. If you are writing public presentations, it's absolutely free. If you want private presentations, then you pay whatever it is a month. I haven't looked into it, but it's like typically, $9 a month, $7 a month, something like that. So we can end up using our keyboard to navigate this. We can end up using swipes when we're on mobile devices. We've got a lot of gorgeous full-screen images. Yeah, you begin seeing now what I'm talking about. We can have interactive content in there. This is a PDF demonstration right there. Did you see that we've got per slide backgrounds on these kinds of things as well? So really what Slide.js has available to, what Reveal.js has available to us is just a refinement of what Deck.js offered us. Unordered lists here. I'm trying to get down here. They offer Markdown support as well, so you could begin doing this kind of stuff in Markdown if you wanted to. And we have all kinds of fun transitions. We've been using Cube. There's a page transition for you. Here's a concave transition for you. Here's a zoom transition. Right? So there are a lot of fun things you can do in modern browsers. Let me turn that off. That'll give all of us motion sickness, right? We also have a number of themes as well. This is the default theme, but I can see what this looks like in the sky theme and the beige theme and the simple theme and the night theme and so on and so forth. So you can see it has all of the things that Deck.js brought to the party. But additionally, some fun things. Custom events. As a matter of fact, it's got a full custom API that we can begin using. And that is what really began drawing me to this. I love the out-of-the-box capabilities, the individual slide transitions and colors and full bleed images and good things like that. The markup is very, very similar. You've got a container class called Reveal and then a bunch of individual slides inside of it. But the ability to begin scripting this up. It has a full-on API. So if you want to get in and really begin programming against this, you can start calling reveal left, right, up, down, next, previous, good things like that. You can turn around and see if you're on the first slide and the last slide. Is the presentation paused? A lot of this kind of stuff. Because, again, what I'm looking for is the ability to build my own lightsaber, the ability to take this and extend it and make it my own. Speaker notes. I don't use a lot of speaker notes, but this is an important feature for a lot of people. What's cool is you can put speaker notes in there, and it will actually launch it in a separate browser window. So, to get to speaker notes, you hit S. So let me pull this down for a second. I'm in this slide deck right now. I'm going to hit S, and you begin seeing that it pulls up a completely separate browser window. And as I am transitioning my main slide deck, it's going to transition that other window as well. What this means is I could have one browser on one monitor, and I can have my speaker notes on another monitor. This is something that people say, well, I could never use a web browser because I need to have my speaker notes available to you. Native in Firefox, native in PowerPoint and Keynote, but it's interesting that they have this capability in a web browser-based technology as well. So here's where it gets especially interesting. Not just speaker notes where you're going to put them in an aside and put your speaker notes there. Where it gets really interesting is if you're running this in Node.js, Reveal will use SocketIO, will use web sockets. So I could have my speaker notes on my iPad and have my main presentation on my laptop. And as long as we're both connected to a common server, as I transition my slides, my speaker notes would keep up to speed on my tablet. Now we're getting interesting, aren't we? And if you can do that, the killer feature that I'm really looking forward to, I haven't used it yet, but I'm really looking forward to, is you could have the slides up on your laptops out in the audience. I could have my slides here, and as I transitioned, I would be transitioning your slides as well. And what we're now dealing with are capabilities that PowerPoint and Keynote couldn't dream of offering. I could suggest that all of you have to go out and buy a MacBook Pro in order to attend my talk. And all of you need to have Keynote. But even then, I would have to write a whole bunch of code, and I don't even know if it's possible, I'm sure it is, to keep your slide deck in coordination with mine. But things like browsers. Okay. Do you have a modern browser? I don't care if you're on Windows, Linux, Mac, Android, iOS, right? I can have all of that stuff on your screen, and through WebSockets, standard web technology, I can really begin doing some interesting things. So here are the pros and cons. I love Reveal.js. I really do think it's kind of state-of-the-art. There are lots of other good things out there. It's got nice PDF support. It's got a full API. I like that. You can see the cons. I was really struggling to come up with bad things to say about this. It doesn't cure cancer. They've promised me that's coming in version 3.0. Yeah? You just rub the tumor right on your computer screen. It'll just cure it right up like that? No. It's not going to cure cancer anytime soon. But really, the con is with great power comes great complexity. I think that's what they said in the comic books, wasn't it? Yeah. That we're really now moving from a simple HTML file to something that requires Node.js and SocketIO and a lot more complexity. It doesn't bother me because I'm doing Node.js development. This is what I do for a living, so this is my technology stack. But it certainly is a far cry from that simple little slide deck I put together in under 100 lines of code. With great functionality, with great capabilities, ratchets up the complexity and the requirements as well. I know we're at the very end of our time right here, but I would be remiss if I didn't mention Yeoman once again. I'm doing my best to mention it in every presentation. How am I doing so far? Yeah? So Yeoman is one of my new favorite libraries. It's a way that you can script things up from the command line. It's a way that you can scaffold things out from the command line. And of course, Yeoman has a wonderful Reveal.js generator. So what I can do now is type in Yo Reveal, and it'll scaffold out my stuff for me. And then I can say, hey, give me a slide, give me a slide, give me a slide. What's really interesting about using this, and something I hadn't considered and hadn't done myself up until now, is you'll notice up to this point, I've always been jamming all of my slides into one big monolithic file. There's nothing wrong with that, but I end up wanting to reuse a lot of these slides. So with this Reveal.js backend, what ends up happening here is you end up with a list of your files in there, and you build up these slides one by one. Let me show you the actual directory that I'm serving these things up from. If it's for me, tell them I'm almost done, okay? So here we go. So this HTML5 slides, if we come in here and start looking in this directory, we'll see that each one of my slides are an individual HTML file out of this. And it just brings them all together at the end. So this has really fostered a ton of slide reuse for me because they are in tiny modular pieces. All I need to do now is copy that one file around rather than having to dig into the file, find the portion that I'm looking for, and copy and paste it that way. I think this is a much healthier form of reuse, those cohesive files, rather than copying and pasting individual line items out. You can tell I'm a big, big fan of Reveal. It's a real improvement from PowerPoint, not from the basics, text, images, colors. But when you start considering the things like having speaker notes on an iPad, like having my slide advancement advance your slides in there, being completely extensible, if you understand web technology, CSS and JavaScript, and not just by hacking, but having an API as a first-class citizen, you begin seeing that there are opportunities to advance state-of-the-art, but it's not a proprietary file format anymore. If you're looking for legacy support, Slidy is what I would recommend. Deck.js is very, very nice, but why would you use Deck.js when Reveal.js is available to you? But these are just 3 options. I showed you that Wikipedia page. There are tens and tens, if not hundreds, of different frameworks out there, and you could start by writing your own. But good ones out there. I encourage you to explore, find one that you like, and begin using it. Did you enjoy yourself? I did as well. Thank you so much for your time and attention.